Hello everyone, Blue Star Saber here once again to discuss Star Wars, this time the Book of Boba Fett. I'm a bit delayed in discussing this season and the show, if you will, because, well, so let's just say some rather personal things happened over the weekend that I couldn't really rewatch the final of the Book of Boba Fett and give my thoughts because, well, let's just say I lost a relative. I'm not going to say who, but yeah, it was a rather sad time. But anyway, now that it's sort of finished, that is sort of no, that wrong person words. Now that I've sort of gone through the sort of grieving process, if you will, I suppose best way to describe it. I am ready to try and get back into doing streams on YouTube, as I was as I do the Book of Boba Fett. Hopefully the latest One Piece chapter, and as well as the season 3 of The Mandalorian, just before, I guess, the movie comes out, though granted. I'll probably end up reviewing, discussing season 3 before, during the time, I think, when the Mandalorian Grogu movie comes out, but yeah. Anyway, the Book of Boba Fett. This is the show which I will be the Book of Boba Fett, the first Star Wars spin-off show from The Mandalorian, in which, of course, will star, of course, the titular character of Boba Fett, if you will, who reclaimed his armor and has now become like the daimyo of Mos Espa, if you will, taking over Jabba's turf, along with Fennec Shan as his right-hand woman, if you will, killing the character Bib Fortuna, who took over while after Jabba the Hutt's death, if you will. So yeah, we have Boba Fett. Boba Fett starring as like his own show, serving as sort of like appears to be a crime lord, if you will. So yeah, arguably there was a lot of hype with this show initially. Let's see, as we can see from here, the Mandalorian. Oops, wrong tab. Share this tab here instead. The Mandalorian's first 2 seasons, as you can see, have been well received. Let's see, both getting like the first season 93% from both fans and critics, and even like season 2 93 again with critics, and the 91 with with like some fans. Arguably a little small decline, but still, maybe some of them don't like all the new characters from like previous shows and lore popping in, but arguably most people are enjoying it. And the Book of Boba Fett. And Boba Fett's episode where he came in and stormed a bunch of stormtroopers, if you will, was arguably well received. However, by the time at the end of Book of Boba Fett ended up happening, the show, as you can see, got rather mixed reviews from critics, and as you can probably see from this tomato score, fans ended up being very divided, and even maybe you could argue the majority hating the show, if you will. For in many ways, the Book of Boba Fett basically became the first Disney Plus show to receive mixed, divided fan base, and arguably some like starting question whether or not it was a good idea to have so many shows on Disney Plus. But how on earth did this happen? Well, we'll probably have to go and look back on the story, if you will, where, of course, we get Boba Fett at... Oops, accidentally stopped sharing tab there. Hold on, let me just share. That was my mistake. Basically, we have Tamara Morrison as Boba Fett. We get a few flashbacks of when he's like... Daniel Logan with like Django going off of Camino and is like the Slave One, if you will, and then of course when he picks up his father's helmet when Mace Windu killed him, those kind of scenes there. He's with like Fennec Shan starting to like build his like crime territory, if you will, sort of recruiting some like muscle, such as these Gamorrean guards. He has a few droids that we see from like Return of the Jedi that are now in his service, but these two Gamorrean guards are which he end up working for him after being brought to him by bounty hunters. He's getting paid respect by Trandoshan, Weequay, was it not Weequay, but a bunch of like criminal gangs, if you will. Trandoshans are like the ones that I can remember. Hold on, let me just take a look at the episodes. I think they are. The other ones are. Hold on, let me just take a look. Okay. Oh no, I am just. Let me just get the list of characters. Cad Bane, recurring. Kristan, Dakin. Hold on. Luffin Pal, Pelimoto, Mordontist. Oh yeah, Cartoonians and what? Let's see, Cartoonians and what was the other one? There was Tadrosians and no. I'm trying to remember the sort of butt alien species name. Not butt aliens really, but Weequay. I'm trying to remember. Oh gosh, hold on, let me just check the episode. Oh yeah. Let's see, one of the Trandoshan's. No. Well, I can't remember the other species, but basically, a bunch of like crime gangs paying tribute to Book of Boba Fett. He eventually ends up also sort of getting like tribute. Let's see, a visit from like this guy, the Twi'lek Marjadomo. Let's see, arguably he is the mayor's aide, if you will, saying that the mayor expects tribute from like Boba Fett, this character here, by the name of hold on, let me just find. Oh yeah, here we are. Let's see, more Sharaz, if you will. Boba Fett is not let's see, take kindly to this, but lets it pass for now. Ends up going to like Gas Fripp and it was like the owner of this sort of like cantina. I think Max Rebo plays in it a few times. So yeah, arguably getting tribute from all the places. Get attacked by a bunch of assassins. And during the course of this, we sort of see in a bit of a flashback, let's see, Boba Fett, let's see, spending time with Tusken Raiders, if you will. Let's see where he is their prisoner at first, but after saving like this one kid from like a sort of four-armed monster, if you will. So yeah, we can see like Tusken Raiders here. He ends up becoming part of the tribe and helping them in this next episode, which we get a bit of a flashback to, where they end up battling basically the here we go. Let's see, the Pike Syndicate, if you will. The let's see, a group of criminals that you see in the in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Let's see, being a part of Boba Fett's, Darth Maul's Shadow Collective, and later having a sort of minor antagonistic role in the solo Star Wars stories middle act, if you will, where Han Solo does the Kessel Run. So you've kind of got like let's see, Boba Fett teaching the Tuskens, let's see, speed bikers to try and deal with the Pikes, and they're able to succeed, while also in the present dealing with sort of like hold on, the let's see, Hutt twins, thinking that they are going to be his antagonist, and I believe these two are going to appear in the Book of Boba Fett. I mean, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, given some of the trailers. So yeah, and they have sort of like a mercenary, if you will. Let me just find. Oh yeah, the Black. Let's see, Karastan, a Wookiee, a black Wookiee that sort of first appeared in Darth Vader comics, being one of like the Hyde mercenary muscle, if you will, who's debuted in his first live action appearance, arguably continuing the trend of like comic and cartoon characters coming to be adapted in live action, if you will. I think arguably this is the first official comic for like the Mandoverse comic character to be adapted in live action from the Mandoverse. Look, arguably the first Star Wars character from a comic to like movie or TV show was Aayla Secura, because George Lucas liked her design. So yeah, George Lucas, emphasizing my belief that George Lucas has a sort of thing for Twi'leks, but yeah. So yeah. So you got like those episodes. Eventually, Boba trying to make a deal with the Pikes. Let's see, for the Tusken Raiders, but they end up being slaughtered, and it seems to be like a biker gang that Boba Fett crossed paths with earlier in the previous episode. And also during this time, he ends up, recruiting these biker gangs called the Mods, cybernetic, who've done modified parts of their bodies, like their eyes, arms, legs, all kind of things. Boba Fett ends up recruiting them after first going to deal with them for apparently stealing water, but only to like side with them when they realize that the water's been a bit of they're being ripped off by prices, if you will. So yeah, you have that, and eventually getting to like a sort of like and being attacked by, of course, Black Kastan, if you will, the twins. Then after this, offer peace, and then offer Boba Fett a present with like offering him this Rancor and abandoning Black Kassan, if you will, which Boba Fett lets go free. So you have that, and then realizing that, okay, the mayor, if you will, the mayor, Mok Shiraz, if you will, had set him up to go in conflict with the Hutts, if you will, after falsifying, going with an assassin, the group that is like associated with them, and apparently tricked the twins. So, and it's revealed that he has made deals with like the Pikes, if you will, and as a result, after sort of like a very controversial speed chase with like the Twi'leks Majordomo, who confesses like all the stuff that the mayor has been doing behind Boba Fett's back, where he's captured by the Mods. Boba Fett realizes he now has a gang war, and with the fourth episode, if you will, of Boba Fett going to like recruiting, seeing how he ended up saving Fennec Shan's life with like and end up having by going to like the Mods main modifier, if this guy here, if you will, the mechanical arm, if you will, so saving her life there. And then asking that she should help save like his ship, the Slave One, Boba Fett, which they do, and they end up getting like revenge. Boba Fett gets a bit of revenge against the Sarlacc a bit, and as well as the biker gang that he believes wiped out the Tusken tribes. So you have that, and let's see. Let me just So doing that, and Boba Fett reveals that he wants to take over Jabba's crime family and all that stuff, because he feels like all these idiots in charge are just cost him his life. And after his perspective from like the Tusken Raiders, he thinks he can run things differently, and he attempts to do that. And Fennec Shan seems to be at least convinced to go along. So yeah, you have like how Boba Fett got the events of like with the flashback to like the Mandalorian season 2 and how he saved her life, and then how they went to go after Mando to get like his armor back. So you've got like that, and then Boba Fett goes with the clan Twitzy, the Aqualish, that's the other family name. I should have realized that sooner. So yeah, the Aqualish, the Clantonian, and the Trandoshan families. Boba tries to get them to join his side, but they refuse, but offers to like be neutral in the conflict, in which they did. And then let's see, Boba Fett decides that they need to hire some more muscle. And then we get an entire episode starring the Mandalorian in, who just by himself, no Boba Fett in, if you will, where he is searching for Mandalorians, if you will, and ends up running into like nope. Let's see here. Oh yeah. It's finding the Armorer and Paz Fizzler, who have both survived the attack from season 1. The Armorer sort of like teaches Betsy Mando about the Darksaber's history and how to try and use it, and mentioning like how Bo-Katan, we get like origins of the Knights of the Thousand Tears, which massacred the Mandalorians, and how Bo-Katan did not rightfully earn the Darksaber. And this is where we get Paz Fizzler trying to like fight him to try and own the weapon, since the Darksaber was made by his ancestors. Boba Fett beats him, but the armor gets Betsy Mando to confess that he has his armor been seen, which means he is no longer part of their Mandalorian group, if you will, since their customers know unless to see their masks. As a result, Mando tries to ask for redemption, but the only way to do that is to bathe in the mines of Mandalore, but Mandalore is apparently become a wasteland, destroyed, if you will, a lifeless world, so it's like he can never truly be redeemed now. So he goes on his way and ends up Betsy Pelimato, who modifies a Naboo starfighter for him, which he thought was a Razor Crest, but no. And you get a bunch of like homages to like Betsy the Phantom Menace's pod racing chase scene, which I enjoyed, and even the funny Betsy homage to like the second episode of season 2 with the X-Wings chase thing with like that same pilot, which I have forgotten the name of, but yeah, arguably this character here, hold on, the Mandalorian X-Wing pilot, I believe. Oh yeah, the Captain Kaza, arguably being the one character to appear in all except I think maybe the Skeleton Crew Mandoverse Star Wars timeline, if you will. So yeah. Yeah, this character here. So that's been the case with like nearly all of them. So but Boba Fett gets recruited by Fennec Shand, and basically sort of like let's see, Boba Fett does it for free and then goes to like, but he needs to do a pit stop first where he's attempting to like let's see, reunite with Grogu, but ends up meeting R2D2, and then later, of course, Ahsoka Tano, if you will, who is like trying to persuade the Mandalorian that Grogu needs to focus on his training and needs to start getting disattached from him, but Mando wants to give him at least the armor, chained armor that he got the armor to create, even though she also told him that Jedi do not form attachments. So yeah, we end up seeing Grogu being trained by Luke Skywalker, and then seeing bits of his past, of seeing how Luke Skywalker, if you will, with arguably much better CGI, de-aging thing, but I'm not going to go and try and find it right now. But yeah, let's see, Grogu seeing how he survived Order 66, seeing Grogu witness Order 66, all that kind of cool stuff, with Luke Skywalker eventually giving him an ultimatum at the end: either become like his first student or go return to the Mando, presenting him with like Yoda's lightsaber, which apparently was destroyed in a comic, but it seems that's a bit of inconsistency there with like Dave Filoni, or unless Yoda built a new lightsaber, but or had a spare one, I'm not sure. But arguably rather sort of minor thing, and arguably a bit of miscommunication between what they could do in the comics and couldn't do in the TV shows. So, but yeah, but we also have during the attempts of this, Boba Fett, the Mandalorian attempts to try and recruit let's see, Cobb Vaneth, if you will. So who has been fighting the Spicers, telling him to get out of his turf, if you will, but unfortunately, unfortunately for him, that they just keep coming. Boba tries to recruit him, but he doesn't want to get his people in trouble, and he's got like a deputy now. But eventually he's like convinced to try and deal with it, but instead gets the arrival of Cad Bane making his live-action debut, seemingly killing his deputy, and as well as the sheriff, seemingly killing the sheriff as well, building up tension for like the final and the Twi'lek. Hold on, let me just find the name. Was it? No, not that one. Ah, yes. Garza Fripp, who I should probably mention in the previous episode, was trying to calm down Black Hassan from like killing a bunch of Tradoshans, which I forgot to mention that Black Hassan gets recruited by Boba Fett in the previous episode after getting drunk and pissed off at Tradoshans. Boba says, like, how about you work for me, as he's like treat him better, if you will, than what the Hutts did. So he seems to agree, but let's see, Garza Fripp gets killed from the explosion, which I will admit, when I first watched it, I didn't realize that she actually got killed off. I thought she might have survived, but I don't know what at least from what I can remember, but I don't know why I thought that. But nevertheless, she ends up dying, being a sort of like civilian casualty of Mos Espa, if you will. So, but yeah, so you've got that, and then you've got like the final episode where basically Mando learns that the Pikes from Cad Bane ends up killing his Tusken tribe, if you will. Mando telling them that the people of Freetown will come and help. Each of his sort of like allies, Black Catan, if you will, gets ambushed by the Tradoshans. As the gangs try to reveal that they're not actually remaining neutral. The Garmonian guards killed by the Clantunian gangsters. They get fallen off a cliff. And the mods end up being ambushed by the Aquilish. After fighting a few of them down, they end up getting saved by, Fennec Shan, who ends up going, being ordered by Boba Fett to deal with the crime family's heads, if you will, as well as the mayor and the Spike's head, if you will. That's at least there. And then ends up being missing for the rest of the episode. Mando and Boba fight off a bunch of the Pikes until if people of Freetown arrive, and then they get ambushed by these giant droids. Boba Fett, and this is where you sort of get like Grogu showing up with R2 with like Pelimoto, who ends up speaking some fans' ideas of not liking the name Grogu, if you will. So they end up being attacked by these two giant droids who, if I had to say, like, kind of got like kind of like droidicas, but not really in design, but in terms of like force fields and like they're like droideka tanks, if you will. So Boba Fett ends up getting the sort of let's see, his Rancor to sort of fight them in this sort of like cool kaiju battle, if you will. But eventually ends up going into like a on a rampage once Cad Bane scares it off, if you will, and let's see, Boba Fett ends up having a one-on-one fight against him, killing him, with Grogu calming down the Rancor, and then Fennec Shan sort of like killing the mayor, if you will. Killing the mayor, as well as all the crime families and the Pikes. With the episode ending with Boba Fett now becoming a respected daimyo from like the citizens and all that stuff, they're wondering, maybe I would prefer doing blaster work, but so it's like it's either that or this, and like let's see, Boba Fett with his remaining forces comes to accept that they're now the protectors of this town, if you will. I should mention the Twi'lek Ritzy aide trying to negotiate throughout the episode, but ends up being caught in the crossfire with Mando and Grogu sort of like returning. Let's see, reuniting and flying off in the Nebulon starfight, if you will, with let's see, Corb Van, let's see, revealed to be alive in Boba's Bacta tank, being edited by the mods let's see, modify, if you will. So that's sort of like ends like those 7 episodes, which I will admit I went a bit longer on that than I would. But yeah, anyway, I suppose I should give my thoughts. Practically, there's a lot to cover and a lot of things that are kind of mixed. Now, I will say this: in many ways, I do think some of these episodes, what I think the best things about some of these episodes is some of these work as very good individual stories, particularly the second, the fourth, the fifth episode, the fifth and sixth episodes. I think, to me, these are arguably the best episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. I will admit, it's nice. I definitely say the highlight of the earlier Dirty episodes is Boba Fett's backstory and like how he became accepted into this Tusken tribe, learned their ways and all that stuff, and try to like help them. Granted, there's a little bit of criticisms that this is sort of like a Dune kind of thing of like white savior, if you will. Arguably, some would say a white savior helping this nomadic tribe deal with like these criminal gangsters they cannot fight by themselves. But I will give some props, since I think Tamara Morrison is not technically, arguably, let's see, like European descent, I believe. So it's a bit not as bad in that regards, though he's still technically an outsider teaching the Tuskens a way of like how to stop the train, though. Arguably, the Tuskens are their own capable warriors, and we see that, particularly like this one female one that's training Boba Fett and how to use the stick that he ends up seeing in like the Mandalorian season 2. So, arguably, granted, they end up being slaughtered. So, I'm not sure if that was like the best course of action, but yeah. So you kind of got all that. I thought like arguably that second episode was pretty good. And also getting to see Tuskens as a bit more civilized culture, if you will, because, well, the movies always portrayed them as a bit of savages, and that always got a bit of criticism that they were sort of loosely based on offensive stereotypes, I think. So it's kind of nice giving them a bit more details of their culture, if you will. So I think it's kind of nice that you see that. And arguably, if you wanted to learn more about Tusken Raiders, arguably the Book of Boba Fett, along with the Mandalorian, are arguably sort of like the best sort of portrayal you can get of them, if you will. So, yeah, I think if you have a fun, if you want to like, if you like Tusken Raiders, I guess, I wanted to learn more about them. The second episode definitely, and even I guess arguably the first episode to some extent, though. but yeah, so I thought that was pretty good. So yeah. And I even like the episode where Boba Fett is teaming up with he first teams up with Fennec Shand and showing how he saved her life, if you will, and talking about how he got her to join him and like argue like saying that, you know what, why don't we become like heads of crime families? We can do better than these idiots that getting us killed and all that stuff, which arguably I can see why he wants to take over a crime family and that. Though I'll get some criticism on like some of the more other stuff later. So that stuff I think is pretty good. And the Mandalorian's first episode, Return of the Mandalorian, arguably that was a very good episode of the Mandalorian, but I'm going to get to more of that bit. But it's like it was cool, like seeing Mando without Grogu, seeing what the character can kind of be if he's on his own and not with like Grogu on his side. I like how it shows that he's struggling to use the Darksaber. All that reuniting with his tribe, which granted like those who survived, though granted they increase their numbers rather rapidly in the next season of Mandalorian, if you will. But yeah, and seeing what would happen, him learning about the history of the Mandalorians, Bo-Katan. We get to see like sort of the massacre of the Mandalorians, seeing their city bombed by TIE fighters, how the watch, if you will, of the Mandalorians survived by being on the moon that I think Death Watch was on, Concordia in season 2, that kind of stuff, and seeing what would happen when the Mandalorians found out that Boba Fett had, let's see, Din Djarin removed his armor. So we see the consequences. He's exiled from like his group of Mandalorians and now must, go out on his own. He wants to try and redeem himself, but unfortunately, the minds of Mando have apparently allegedly destroyed. Reduced to glass, if you will. So it's like he can never be redeemed, and he now has to try and find his own sort of thing to do. Arguably, the first thing he does is need to get in like a new ship. I do like seeing how galactic transport works, saying no weapons inside the thing. So arguably, they allow you to transport weapons, but not on the thing, not on your own person, which arguably would probably make sense for this. And I do like that little let's see, what's Greedo's species? Nadonian. I'll think of like the same species as Greedo, basically. Kid that just keeps looking at the Mando and then seeing him in the ship. So yeah, I do like, and I will admit, I'm a sucker for like the Phantom Menace. So seeing in the M1 Naboo Starfighter, even if it's just sort of modified from Mando, if you will, that was fun. And just seeing Mando interact with Pelimoto, who also had a bit of a cameo in one of the previous episodes as well. Just seeing that sort of their fun dynamic, if you will. Boba, like, let's see, Kurt trying to persuade the Mando for you know what? Why don't you try? Just help me build this ship and give it a test run. So yeah, I enjoyed it. All that stuff was fun and a bit of Phantom Menace nostalgia for me. Granted, some people, if you don't like the Phantom Menace, you might not care for those moments. But as a fan, it was kind of nice seeing that sort of like racetrack again, if you will. So with Mando testing it out, not realizing just how significant that race affected the galaxy, but still, it was fun. And arguably the next episode, arguably pretty good with like seeing what Grogu's been up to with training under Luke Skywalker, sort of that. Learning that Ahsoka and Luke Skywalker actually met. Now I'm just curious to see. Apparently Dave Filoni has a plan for that. I'm curious what it is, but we're not shown here, to be honest. We arguably it's something planned. I'm not sure if it's going to be for like something animated or live action, but at the very least, Luke knows about Ahsoka, and it seems to be Ahsoka may have taught Luke some about the Jedi's ways of not having attachments. I do wonder if this is why Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order is more similar to like the old Jedi Order rather than differentiating from like in the Star Wars legends, if you will, because Luke didn't really forbid like attachments like family and marriages and all that kind of stuff. Heck, he even had a son, but here it seems like he's more aligned with like the Jedi's way of non-attachments and not going back. Hence why he gives Grogu the ultimatum of either train to be a Jedi or go back to Mando. Arguably, I think many Star Wars fans would rather Luke not go down this path, but I guess when the sequel trilogy set up Luke Skywalker to fail, this was arguably one of the mistakes that he ultimately ended up doing, if you will, sort of trying to detach Ben from his family. So, yeah, all that kind of stuff, if you will. So, but yeah. That's just more of like problems, I guess you could say, with tying into the sequel trilogy and like the mistakes that Luke Skywalker eventually does. But arguably, of course, Grogu chooses to go with like go back to Mando, which I think is a choice we all expected in the end, that these two would reunite, though perhaps quicker than we imagined. Though arguably this spares Grogu from being wiped out by Ben Solo, though who knows? It's possible Grogu could end up becoming a Jedi later, since he will be a lot more. I believe he will be at least 25. I think he'll be 75 when the time of like the sequel trilogy. For all we know, Rey now trying to restore the Jedi Order. It might end up counting Grogu and maybe trying to offer more relaxed teachings of the Jedi down the line. I'm not entirely sure what Disney's going to do, but arguably, since Grogu can live up to like at least 900 years like Yoda, there's always a chance of him coming back to be like a bit of a Jedi, or maybe a Mandalorian Jedi, sort of like the one that first created the Darksaber. So there's stuff like that. So yeah, arguably seeing like like all this sort of Jedi training backstory thing, and also the first introduction of like Cad Bane, and just seeing how ruthless he is, killing the deputy and seemingly killing Cobb Vanth, if you will. Which I think it makes sense that you have this character appear in the Book of Boba Fett, since he had his arm and stuff. So you would want to see that, but yeah. So arguably, these individual episodes, I think, are pretty good, even if just by themselves, or like part of The Mandalorian. The other episodes are kind of mixed, if you will, for me. On one hand, I don't mind Boba, like, you'd see flashback stuff of Boba, like, in this being prisoner of the Sand People, if you will, and then being accepted into a tribe after saving a kid from, like, a monster with 4 arms, which arguably, perhaps maybe they made him that seemingly maybe if an unrealistic situation of Boba Fett killing with just the chains, but I don't know. I guess they went a bit. I guess they just decided to just do something like that. But arguably, the biggest, I think, mixed thing that of the first episode is showing Boba Fett a bit of being a bit vulnerable and weak, if you will, particularly being targeted by those assassins groups, which arguably they'll get mowed down, but he struggles a bit, which arguably seems a bit different from like when Boba Fett was just storming those stormtroopers. Now, you could maybe argue these assassins might be stronger than the stormtroopers, but they get taken out pretty easy by like the Fennec Shan, if you will, when they're not being surrounded. So yeah. So arguably some mixed stuff there, and the third episode now, arguably I think besides maybe the last episode, this is probably the most criticized episode. And while there's like the sadness of like the Tuskens, I don't know, I've kind of felt like they were taken out too soon, or maybe there should have been all this sort of Tusken stuff should have been done in one episode. Let's see. But let's see, it's like they're kind of like, they're wiped out, and you don't really see the Tusken stuff affect Boba Fett much until like either briefly in the 4th episode and like the final episode, when you learn that it was the Pikes that ended up killing them. But and you don't see Boba Fett trying to help any more Tuskens afterwards. So yeah, arguably good origin story. But On one hand, I do like that Boba Fett did end up recruiting more forces to his like crew, like with letting he recruit the mods. But the biggest problem is the mods, I'd say, probably seen a bit too campy, and arguably they made the show a bit more campy with their designs. Now, I'm not saying that the mods necessarily, they shouldn't be in Star Wars. I think I'm not even mad at like the cyborg gang existing. I think the biggest problem is that it's on Tatooine, which being the sort of desert planet feels like they don't really mesh well, especially with those bike things. If anything, I feel like you would see these guys on the lower levels of Coruscant or some other city planet, if you will. They feel like they belong more on a cyberpunk world rather than the deserts of Tatooine. So now, arguably, you needed some sort of cyborg thing to like explain how Fennec Shan survived, but arguably the mods were a bit too campy, and the chase sequence felt a lot like sort of Spy Kids chasing thing. Now, granted, this might be the fact that for the Book of Boba Fett, I believe you have, let's see, Robert Rodriguez, if you will. I think being sort of like the showrunner, if you will, for this. Let's see. Well, actually, Jon Favreau, but let's see. But Robert Rodriguez directs most of the episodes, and he also directed like the Boba Fett episode in The Mandalorian. But he also ended up, I think, having a huge input of like with Jon Favreau in this show, and I think arguably the mods are probably his influence, which arguably Spy Kids is that fun sort of campy ditzy movie series that you might like if, let's see, when you were like my generation was a kid, but arguably having them kind of like that kind of like chase sequence and something like Boba Fett, it's just like feels a bit jarring, if you will. I'm not see, perhaps if there was like its own separate show from this, but arguably the chase scene was too Spy Kids thing. Maybe that might have belonged better in a more, let's see, kid-friendly character Star Wars show, but maybe not with like Boba Fett when you want to see more ruthless stuff, which is also another criticism of the show, which Boba Fett seems to be a bit different than the ruthless killer that we saw in like the films, or at least hinted at in the films, and then in like the Mandalorian. Now, granted, you still see bits of that here and there, but no, granted, it feels like he doesn't really seem like the same character. Now, arguably, I'm not against Boba Fett becoming more of an anti-hero kind of character. I mean, like going from like a villain, he got beaten by heroes, eaten Sarlacc, then arguably had a humiliating defeat, and arguably probably doesn't really want to go and try and fight like the original trilogy cast of characters again, if you will, and arguably being, let's see, maybe at first a prisoner to the Tuskens, but then one of their members. I can see how that might change his perspectives a bit, if you will, but I don't know. I feel like him wanting to be more, arguably, let's see, I can see him caring for Tuskens, but I just the people of Mos Espa, if you will, or Mos Eisley, I keep mixing up the name. It feels a bit jarring a bit, because it's like, why would he care for these people? So it's that kind of thing, and let's see, but arguably, okay, I see wanting him to be a better gang boss, let's see, than the Hutts and all that, Pikes, all that in charge, because like they've just gotten him killed a few times, but I didn't see enough of like why he would want to care for these people and all that, but he does. But so I think that is a bit off-putting. And then him questioning, do I really want to be a protector at the end? But I don't know, like, what's the point? No, it might just be like Fennec Shan saying like it's either us or some other guys. So, but he does seem to eventually accept being their protector and respect eventually. Though, but yeah. At the same time, I even liked throughout the episode you have like you have Fennec Shan and Boba trying to question what to do and stuff. Sometimes you wonder if Fennec Shan's going to like double cross Boba, but ultimately it leads nowhere. And I'm not necessarily sure Boba Fett was proven incorrect or discorrect by correct or incorrect, really, with like between the two banters of this sort of stuff. But even though I do like how you got Shannon trying to question Boba with like his motives and like plans, but ultimately seems to eventually go along with them even if she disagrees, and it doesn't lead to any long-term conflict. But heck, so yeah. So but yeah, the guy. So yeah, and also another issue I'd say is ultimately that Boba Fett is absent for like let's see, 2 episodes. One episode he doesn't appear in at all, and another one he has like one scene, and then that is it. When Mando is going to go recruit like the freemen, if you will, so the free like Cobb Vanth and his like folk, if you will. So yeah, didn't even like have Boba Fett interact with Cobb Vanth, like oh, so this is like the guy who now has my armor and all that stuff. So oh, you had my armor for a bit, that kind of sort of stuff. You didn't really see that, if you will. So which is kind of disappointing, given that Cobb Vanth's been shot. But yeah, now so he's like 2 episodes absent, and it's like the one's close to the finale, if you will. So it's like, why are you doing this? This show, it's called the Book of Boba Fett. You have your main character absent for 2 episodes. Now, granted, this probably wouldn't be a problem if this was like a 10-episode season where you got like a few more episodes featuring Boba Fett, if you will, which I'm going to go to on a bit later. But yeah. And arguably, all this stuff kind of culminates with like all these different plot lines meshing together for this one big epic battle, epic battle at the end. But the biggest problem is it feels such a small scale conflict when it's like hyped up as this gang war, if you will. Arguably because the biggest problem is Boba Fett's forces are too small, and even when the free folk come, the people of Freeman's town, if you will, come in to help, it still feels like a small conflict, even if they do increase the numbers a bit. And arguably not really any really major casualties. Maybe a few Freemen got shot, and arguably then the 2 Gamorrean guards got pushed off a cliff, which arguably being the only real casualties in Boba's group, if you will. Which arguably they don't have names. Arguably it's Sand people don't have names. Arguably problem with some of these characters do not have names. So it's like not really enough to like fully care. You might recognize them here and there, but with their faces. But yeah, arguably I feel like this could have been fixed. So instead of Boba Fett having just 2 Gamorrean guards, he has like maybe at least a dozen of them all around, at least a few of them able to like patrol as a group, only to then get ambushed and killed. Heck, you can even have some of them with like Black Hassan, because he's by himself, gets surrounded by Trandoshians, if you will, and seemingly it looks like he's finished, but then you seen later he comes back after off screen defeating them. So it's like you put him in like a possible situation, but he survives, and arguably he only gets shot where there's bits of armor around him, which is a bit jarring because it's not like he's covered in Beskar armor. So yeah, but arguably, since he's a popular comic book character, they don't really want to kill him, and also it's like a black furred Wookiee. That's gonna interest a bunch of Star Wars fans and merchandise. But yeah, the Gamorreans. So the Gamorreans were sort of the casualties by default, but I feel like there at least should have been a lot more. Maybe even have a few other no-named grunts around the place. Okay, just should have made Boba Fett's forces bigger. Heck, maybe even have him sort of recruiting other Sand People tribes, like the ones that are with the Freeman, if you will, that had that sort of alliance, if you will, against the Kayat Dragons. So stuff like that. But arguably, and also I suppose Cad Bane, such a little role, if you will. Now, I'm not against him being killed by Boba Fett, but the biggest problem is he came in last minute, if you will. had a few scenes, and then he's gone, and most people don't really know who this character is. And the biggest problem is also no one really knows the history of Boba Fett and Cad Bane. There was Clone Wars episodes that were going to have Cad Bane teach Boba Fett because he wants to make Boba Fett into the next Django because he had a rivalry with Django. And eventually, it's on Tatooine. Then eventually ends on the sort of Sand people get involved, and then eventually going to end up with a shootout, if you will, between Boba Fett and Cad Bane. And Cad Bane, at least, dents Boba's head helmet, if you will, and that's where the dent comes from. That kind of history and all that stuff. And arguably, now, Cad Bane and Boba talk of that. They do have history together, but no one knows this. Not the casuals who end up getting, or the fans that got into Mandalorian, or even the Clone Wars, because at best you got a few deleted scenes and clips because unfortunately Disney cancelled the Clone Wars when they first bought it and only ended up bringing it back for one last season where Dave Filoni was very, very picky on which episodes to adapt and they've never been adapted, neither like an animated film, short specials, but yeah, so it's like none of that was adapted, not even for this live action, if you will. So yeah, and arguably the Pikes kind of, there throughout the show, not really much of a presence and build up for like a threat villain thing. And the Hutts are just like, oh no, this territory is ours. Oh no, we apologize for trying to kill you. Here, have a Rancor and Black Kazan, if you will. So there. And but yeah, and also one criticism I've also seen is that most people don't really seem to care too much about the people of Mos Espa. The only one that we really associate is the one that was in charge of that sort of cantina, and she got killed off. Now, arguably a sort of hard thing to see, like the one civilian that we are used to, but arguably, I don't know, could have shown more of the people, Boba Fett, the people at least, or them, having opinions on the crime war stuff. But yeah, biggest problem is just too much just shoved in, and the fact that arguably you've got 3 episodes that one that should have arguably feature heavily with the Mandalorian. Now, I'm not against the Mandalorian showing up, heck, even as a cameo to assist Boba Fett, if you will, but you got 3 episodes with huge significant plot points for the Mandalorian. Him being exiled by the Mandalorians for having his face shown, and him getting a new starfighter, which arguably not necessarily too much a big deal. That part you can probably just do off screen, if you will. And then a episode where he goes to try and find Grogu, meets Ahsoka again. Luke is training Grogu and giving him the ultimatum of either becoming a Jedi or returning to the Mandalorian. And then the next episode, you have Mando and Grogu reuniting again. Arguably, this feels like all this is happening in the span of 3 episodes and on a spin-off show. And it feels like this should be in the main Mandalorian thing. And frankly, this all feels like it's happening too soon. At the very least, it feels like you should have done an entire season of Mando and Grogu sort of separated, at least a standard 8-episode seasons, and maybe then go with a finale where they are reunited with Grogu does a choice. Granted, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know why this decision was done. I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps, Disney executives, seeing how much merchandisable Mando and Grogu were together, wanted them back sooner rather than later, and maybe forced Dave Filoni and George Favreau's hands, which that could be one way, or they thought this was such a good idea that perhaps no one told them that, no, wait a season or something. But yeah, and do it in the actual Mandalorian one, because now at the very least, Star Wars fans, Mandalorian fans have to watch at least 3 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett in order to understand Mando's story in the Mandalorian. And maybe you have to watch the other 4 to get the context of Boba Fett with the Tuskens with Cad Bane's situation and the Pikes. But yeah, so arguably it's this is why some people consider the Book of Boba Fett Mando season 2.5, if you will, because you've got these key essential episodes that explain what happens for like season 3 of The Mandalorian. So you've got that, and unfortunately, it feels like this is all happening too soon. Now, honestly, I think the Book of Boba Fett, I'm not against the ideas it's shown and all that stuff. I even thought some of the stuff is cool, like the Rancor having a Boba Fett riding a Rancor, having a kaiju battle against these giant droids that have like droidica like shields, who are more like threatening like tanks, if you will. So, not against stuff like this, if you will. That is cool, but it feels like there should have been more episodes of this show, if you will. Arguably, maybe having like all the Tusken Raider stuff, maybe actually all in one episode, at least 2 episodes, if they're going to be wiped out. But at the very least, if you're going to have it spanned for like multiple episodes, maybe actually show more, like have them have more impact in the modern day, where Boba Fett tries to recruit other Tusken Raiders to become part of his crime thing, at least have an alliance with them and stuff. It's like, let's see, help me avenge. Let's see let's see this tribe here, if you will. Granted, of course, he doesn't really learn that that tribe was wiped out by the Pikes later, but I don't know. Try and make at least alliance, and want to make it Tatooine a sort of better place for the people in the cities as well as the Tuskens, if you will. Kind of combine both, let's see, aspects there, and heck, maybe even show an episode of Boba. Heck, maybe even bringing Daniel Logan back. I know he's arguably a bit older now, if you will. But wouldn't look like Kid Boba, but maybe, I don't know, some edits, if you will, with like the de-aging CGI like you do with Mark Hamill, and maybe actually adapt those Clone Wars episodes of, let's see, Boba Fett training under Cad Bane and then having that rivalry dent thing just to build up their confrontation at the end, if you will. So it's like, okay, so this is how these two characters know each other. This is their history. Cad Bane's the one that gave him the dent, arguably one that could actually be a challenge for Boba. Yeah, you know what? Build that up. Sort of build that up there. Let's see. Maybe show more episode. Maybe an episode where you see more of the build up with like the Pikes as an antagonist. Let's see, Boba Fett trying to recruit more like gangs or like mercenaries and all that stuff. Increase the numbers, if you will, maybe even with trying to recruit other Sand People tribes, stuff like that. And maybe even having an episode, maybe arguably with the Cad Bane stuff, showing Boba Fett's history with like the city, if you will. Maybe revealing that this place ended up being where Boba Fett, once he becomes like a bounty hunter after the loss of his father, sort of moves here, starts this bounty hunter gang that we've seen in the Clone Wars, coming back here quite often, and show that, okay, this place has sort of become like a second home to him after Kamino, if you will, and sort of like being somewhat attached. Maybe even have him interact with some of the locals, even a little bit at least. So show us why Boba Fett ended up caring for these people and why he decided that taking over, he would be their protector. Give us a reason, like, okay, despite being a ruthless cold killer, this is the one place he feels like he can be decent, if you will. I don't know. Feels like he belongs. Something like that. Build more into like why he wants to become like the crime gang, daimyo that protects this town, this planet, if you will. And maybe even build more of like what the spice has negatively affected to the people of Tatooine and showing that. But arguably, that's always been a Star Wars problem, minus, I guess, Andor of like, tell, show, don't tell, if you will, but stuff like that. So, yeah, things like that. Other characters, I think, fine. Granted, Fennec Shan, I think, despite questioning Boba a bit, ultimately ends up just complying and ends being absent for like most of the finale, except killing the heads, which was cool. But yeah, arguably the mayor's aide, Twi'lek, arguably sort of like this annoying chatty character, but I think he fits the role well. Everyone is telling him to shut up, but curious it would be now Boba Fett's mayor or something. But yeah, all this sort of stuff. I'm fine with some of the characters. Granted, the Twi'lek cantina owner was kind of wasted. I don't know. Maybe you could have had maybe in those flashback episodes where Boba interacts with her more. Maybe like say that was his favorite cantina or something. He always comes to visit her when he was younger and all that stuff. I don't know, show more sign, building up more to the care thing. So yeah, this is arguably what the show needed, showing that more at least more episodes. I think building up with like some of the stuff that you get in the finale, the Cad Bane stuff, maybe like Cad Bane, Boba trying to recruit more Ritzy forces for his town, showing more of the Pikes with Ritzy affecting the planet, and even trying to remember the Pikes, and even showing Boba Fett like caring more for like this place and why he wants to be daimyo here, all that sort of stuff. I don't mind the Tusken Raider stuff is good. The Mando stuff is fine, but it should have been in its own show at the very least, or at least that stuff being its own season, and then those spare episodes being used to all the stuff I described. And also it's the fact that this episode's one episode short from a standard season. I wonder if that's because the Rancor was such a huge budget that they merged, that the final episode being so long it was a merger of like two separate episodes. But yeah. Now, like I said, these episodes of the Book of Boba Fett are individually, there's some you can join, but as a whole, it's a mess, and arguably either should have had more episodes, or those Mandalorian episode stuff should have been done in its own season and just have the Mandalorian as a cameo coming out to help Boba. Stuff like that. Arguably, this is what you should have done, but yeah, or at least something like 10 episodes, but yeah. So yeah, if I had to give the show an overall score down the line, I think at best a 6 if I'm feeling generous with like some of the individual story episodes. Thinking that at least 4 out of 3 are good, great episodes, even if individually, but or at worst a 4 out of 10, where the episode, while there's some very good individual episodes, as overall the story's narrative is a bit of a mess, and it feels like there should have been more episodes to include some stuff that was talked about but not shown. Stuff like this. And arguably, this show may have done more long-term damage to the Mandalorian, the Mandoverse, than other Disney Plus and any others like show, and arguably showed Star Wars fans that Disney Plus can fumble with like Star Wars TV. Now I can see why they wanted to build sort of like did all this crossover stuff with the cinematic universe with like Marvel, but it feels like the Mando did it pretty too fast, too soon, and as a result maybe affected like the overall show's structure, and arguably didn't give people a chance to do like a second season of the Book of Boba Fett, because I think Tamara Morrison was a bit disappointed that he didn't get to do it. Let's see, feel like he didn't do the character justice or something, and wants to have another go at it, but there doesn't seem to be any talks of a second season, even though you had a post-credit scene sort of like thing with Cobb Vash being modified, showing that he's still around. So yeah, that could have been interesting for like a second season with like Boba Fett and the cyborg Con Vash, if you will, teaming up against whatever threat comes to Tatooine. I don't know. Feels like, I don't know, you could have done at least a second season or something with Boba Fett, but we have got no word since then, and it feels a shame because Tamara Morrison is up for doing it again, but it seems like no one's talking with him in Disney, and yeah. Heck, I wouldn't even mind if you did like a Boba Fett movie. I mean, some people like thought that was originally going to be, I think, a plan, but unfortunately, the director they hired, who ended up doing like the bad Fantastic Four movie, and that Fox did in 2015, and also I think had a meltdown or something. But yeah, arguably. I don't know. I wish they would do something again with Boba Fett, and arguably perhaps maybe try and blend in more of this now more protector Boba Fett with the more ruthless killer that we like expect from him. I don't know. Do a bit of a blend, showing that while he's like this protector for these people, any of these enemies he will gun down blazing, if you will. So yeah, stuff like that. Anyway, That's my overall thoughts on the show. For those who end up listening to this stream, I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. And I'll see you next time when I get a chance to review the third season of The Mandalorian, as well as review The Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Those will be my next 2 Star Wars stuff. But yeah, I've also got something with One Piece to deal with. But for now, I am Blue Starsaber, signing off. Thank you, everyone, for listening. May the Force be with you.